Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Oh boy. You guys, there were some of you who were looking forward to all of my thoughts about Crescent City 2 and all of my thoughts about Crescent City 3. It's not happening. This is happening instead. This is happening instead because I struggled so hard through House of Sky and Breath that I just did not have any motivation to film my thoughts about it because my thoughts were, I'm bored, like 90% of the book. So then I finally got to the end of that one and the thing happens at the end. And so I moved into the third one, not feeling super hopeful. And I had a lot of thoughts about the third one. We're gonna start with some non-spoilery immediate thoughts about this series. We're gonna talk about this series as a whole right now, okay? Yeah, we're gonna talk about the series as a whole. So starting off with first Crescent City. I don't know why I gave it a 4-star. I don't think it's a 4-star. This is a 3-star. This is a 3-star book. This is also trickery. It is 800 pages. This pisses me off. They are the same size book, like page-wise. These pages are just so much thinner than these pages. They're both 800 pages. So that looks like a trick. It looks like a trick. So, Crescent City 1, 3 stars. House of Sky and Breath, 3 stars, low 3-star, worst of the series. Which is controversial, I know, because most people are saying this is the worst one. I think this is the best one. For not the reasons you think, though. The way this is a 3.5. I give this a 3.5. The way that I rated this series was 99% based on, was I bored? And that's really what I base these books on. There's so many things that are wrong with these books. Like, there's so much wrong that it's hard to rate them based on just bad. Are they bad? They're bad. They are bad. But so I ended up rating these on entertainment reasons. So that's why definitely A House of Sky and Breath was easily the worst one. Like, it was so boring. It was so boring. I don't know how people think this is better than House of Flame and Shadow. Like, I just don't. I don't. Well, okay, I do because of the things that were happening in the third book. But generally, this one just put me close into a reading slump, while this one took me out of it in a very strange way. Again, it's not good, but it was at least entertaining. It kept me on my toes for what was happening. I feel like at this point I have to discuss the book with spoilers. So 3.5, and generally it's just a bad series. It is significantly worse than anything else that Sarah J. Maas has written. And I have lots of commentary on that. So we're gonna get into spoilers. This is going to be full spoilers of all 3 books. So if you want to read the books, do not pass go, do not continue. We're gonna be getting into the nitty-gritty of why these books failed. I actually made a PowerPoint. Because like, and the PowerPoint is all over the place because it was fueled by rage. My PowerPoint. Why Crescent City sucked ass. Isn't that so good? It's so good. I just used a bunch of like things from Canva. So yeah. We're gonna be doing this PowerPoint format. I'm gonna see how I can do this because this might be a little bit hard to actually film with the PowerPoint. This is gonna be a long video. Very long video, because I got a lot to say. I got a lot of problems. Let's first talk about what I liked about the series. Mostly everything that I liked about the series were specific characters and less plotline, because I think the plotline generally was terrible throughout all 3 books. So we are getting into spoilers. We're getting into spoilers. Again, like I said, do not pass go. We are jumping right into them. So, things that I liked. I like Bryce as a character. Sometimes. I like Bryce when she is separated from Hunt. We'll get to that. I almost immediately started word vomiting my reasons for hating Hunt. Which is pretty much what ruined the whole series for me. Anyway, I like Bryce. I think Bryce is a very different character compared to Feyre and shoot, what is her name from Throne of Glass? I feel like she's a little similar to Nesta as a character. She's just knows what she wants and is who she is. And I like that as a character. And she has a different outlook on life than I feel like a lot of characters. So I really like her. And a lot of people don't like Nesta. So I can see why a lot of people also did not like Bryce. But Bryce is she's a fun character to read because you don't necessarily know what she's going to do, which sometimes can be to the detriment of the book because sometimes she'll do something and you're like, where'd that come from? But generally, she is the same throughout all 3 books. She definitely grows up, which is really appreciated. I liked her character grow throughout all 3 books. I do think she's a bit overpowered. I think that could have been toned down a bit, but it worked kind of for the series. But I did like reading from her as a character. I like that she's a really good friend to people and she is just very family oriented and she was just fun to read. She was different. She was not out here to make you like her, which I liked. Rune, Bryce's brother. Actually really liked Rune. I think there were some wonky things that happened in the first book, which we'll get to. First book going into the second book. A lot of that relating to, I think Sarah J. Maas had a clear idea of what she wanted to do with the first book with Rune as a character and Hypaxia, and then that was adjusted after the first book was finished. Well, again, we'll talk about that. But I liked Rune as an interesting character. I thought he had some pretty good character arcs. I feel like he changed a lot, a decent amount as a character, and I think he was a really good brother, especially in the later 2 books. He was just, again, a very interesting character to read from. Same with Therian. I really, really liked Therian as a character because he wasn't this big macho man character. He was kind of a coward a little bit. And he was very different than a lot of the overdone macho men in a lot of the Sarah J. Maas books. I liked how he was a little more chill and he wasn't afraid to be like, I don't want to be a part of this situation. I did like the modernization. That can be a little iffy later, but I liked the idea behind these books. I liked the thought process of putting this in a Fae modernized, there's phones, technology. I thought that was really, really cool. I like Lunatheon as a place. I think it's really, really neat and different compared to other worlds that Sarah J. Maas has built so far. So that was fun to read as well. I liked reading about the technology and the First Light and the drop and all that type of stuff. That stuff was really cool. There were some problems later on with some of the technology, but kind of let that go. So I did like the setting being this modernized Fae world. Ugh, Leheba. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Best character, and I love the theme of the fire sprites throughout all 3 books. That is probably one of the more consistent things that went through all 3 books was this, I guess, mostly first book and, well, yeah, were they in the second book? I can't remember if they were, I think they were in the second book. They were at least mostly consistent throughout the first book and the third book, having these fire sprites present and their, like, attitudes and who they are. They were fun. They definitely could have had a stronger presence in the books. I think Leheba being killed in the first book was a mistake. Like, I legit, like, a lot of times I'm like, okay, I get why these characters are killed. I get reasons. I think Leheba actually should have been utilized better as a character. I think her storyline was way too short. I think they could have done some sort of other sacrifice in the first book over killing her, because she could have done so much stuff, especially in book 3. Book 3, Leheba would have been awesome. Would have been awesome. So I'm very sad because her arc could have been gaining her power. She got her freedom at the end of book 1. Stuff like that. I just think it was trauma for the sake of trauma with the death of Leheba. Like, something else could have been done instead of cutting an interesting character's arc short. So even though she's one of my favorite characters, I do think the arc was done incorrectly. House of Flame and Shadow. I think all of the houses were underutilized, but House of Flame and Shadow was so interesting and the glimpses that we got of it were so cool that I am so disappointed that they weren't capitalized on more. Like, you could have had almost an entire book taking place in House of Flame and Shadow and you would not be bored because the weird stuff that was going in there. I would read a cozy mystery from Ethan's point of view working for Jessica in the House of Flame and Shadow, and he has to like run errands. I would love that. I think all the houses were underutilized. Literally, they are named after the houses. House of, almost didn't say it right, House of Earth and Blood. They're named these, and I feel like we never really saw them. Like, House of Flame and Shadow, I feel like we saw the most of, and it still was barely anything, and you just don't understand the dynamics of these things. And it was so very disappointing that the houses weren't a bigger part of the books. Jessica as a character. Jessica was one of my favorite things about the first Crescent City, and the fact that she was barely in the second one, like she just made some like random appearances, was super sad. I really think that Bryce should have been working for Jessica again in book 2. I think that would have been really interesting. And then Ethan working for Jessica in book 3 was awesome. I love that. So I think Jessica was underutilized in book 2 significantly. And her storyline kind of just like jumped you. Like, her storyline could have been established better in book 2 and then dragged up to this point in book 3, because there's some things that don't really make sense when you really look at them. Yeah, her storyline really needed to have been meatier, basically, because she has this whole backstory with Apollyon, which would have been really cool to actually explore more. So I don't know if we're going to do a prequel, because I could see a prequel being done there. But again, just underutilization of the best features of these books. Most interesting character, and definitely the most underutilized. Don't even know why she was pretty much in these books at all, because she didn't do anything. Fury. Fury is the coolest, most interesting, just dynamic character, and she was basically pointless in these books. She is supposed to be this crazy badass. Everyone's afraid of her. We didn't get any hint of that in like any of the books. Fury should have been one of the side like quest things. I keep calling them side quests. Instead of Ethan and Cormac and I'll get to that. The whole stupid thing with Ophion in the second book. The whole second book should have had Fury as a main character instead of some of those other people who shouldn't have been main characters. And Fury's, oh my gosh, I would have loved a Fury book. I would have much preferred reading a book about Fury than like 90% of these characters that we did read about. So Fury is such a great character. I really hope she gets her own book, potentially, because we know that Sarah J. Maas is going to milk the shit out of these books, because I really thought it was done. I really thought these 3 books were done. I thought Crescent City was over, and I was very much mistaken. There's probably another 6 books that are going to come out in this series, and it is so frustrating. But I'm assuming something will come up with Fury, because she's such an interesting character for having done nothing. So that's so underutilized. I'm so upset how good of a character to just be wasted. So anyway, those are the things that I liked. I thought I'd have more things that I liked, or that they'd actually come off as things that I liked instead of just more complaints. Okay, we're gonna move on to the PowerPoint. We're moving on to the things that it's what it says. Why Crescent City sucked ass. I mean, I have full explanations. I gotta get this so you can actually see the PowerPoint. Okay, let's go. I should have had like background music and all that. Look at that fancy. Okay, Bryce and Hunt. Bryce and Hunt, major problem. Bryce and Hunt are a major problem in this entire series. So they definitely have some of the worst chemistry that I've ever seen between 2 romantic characters. Like, oh my gosh. I feel like book 1 just completely ruined Hunt as a character for me, when you made Hunt do kind of some shady stuff, and it just made you not trust him, which is highly unfortunate. And Hunt is so controlling. Like, I have my own thing for Hunt. Hunt has his own thing next. But in the relationship specifically, Hunt is so controlling, and I hate that she was calling people alpha holes the whole time. That's what it was. He was so beyond controlling of everything that she did. And if she did not talk to him about something she was doing in advance, he would literally lose his shit. It really just came off as him being threatened by her and who she is and what she can do. And it did not feel like he trusted her. And I think Sarah J. Maas was trying to do the thing where it was like, oh, he's just like trying to look out for her and stuff. But it's like, he did it too much. It is too over the top. It's actually why a lot of people had problems with Rhysand in A Court of Silver Flames, is he's too much in that book with Feyre and like trying to protect the baby and all that stuff. He is over the top to a point of so controlling, it makes you cringe and want her to leave him. So the whole time I'm just thinking, get away from him. Get away from him. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. I also don't think they would actually stay together. I don't think the way they communicate is completely different. The way that Bryce views the world is so different than the way Hunt views the world. And I think a lot of times that can be good, but in their case, it's just going to cause fights. The way that Bryce handles situations, Hunt legitimately doesn't like. He legitimately doesn't like the way she handles things. And she's not, like, she shouldn't change the way she does things. It's not like she's hurting people. She just has a way of thinking things out that is different than other people. And Hunt seems to hate it. He does not like how she acts. And to me, sometimes he acted like he was embarrassed by the way she was acting. Just saying. I'm just saying. A lot of people are going to disagree about this stuff, but Hunt really was one of the reasons that I did not like this series as much as I could have. I also think Bryce is stronger without him. That is a big thing, especially looking at book 3. Oh, and like even what Bryce was doing in book 1 when she was like ditching Hunt and doing her own thing and solving problems, she is so much stronger without him. And I think that's why I like Rhysand and Feyre and Aelin and Rowan, because they make each other stronger. They lean on each other and they're able to do their own thing. But if they're together, they're stronger. And I think Sarah J. Maas was trying to do that with Hunt and Bryce, like literally making Hunt I was going to say a conduit, but Bryce is the conduit. Making Hunt made for her, but it just makes her seem weak. And anytime they're in scenes together and fighting together, except for the very, very end, Hunt seems like he is doing the brunt of the heavy lifting. And I just never felt that way about other characters, I feel like, in Sarah J. Maas worlds. Like, yeah, Rhysand's super powerful, but Feyre literally is amazing. And I think Bryce is too. That's what kills me. I think Bryce is really good, but I feel like she is stifled in every scene that she is in with Hunt, except for like the big showdown. She's pretty good in that. But even then, he's still kind of holding her back and questioning what she's doing. And maybe a lot of people will see that as a good thing, but I just really don't like the way he goes about being with her. So their relationship, their dynamic is probably really what poisoned this book series for me, because it is the point. It is like the main point is them together. Just Hunt now. Just Hunt has his own thing. So he's just, I literally write it right here. He just sucks. He just sucks. Sarah set him up for failure in book 1 when he betrayed everyone. And Sarah literally just makes him so unlikable. Like, he's so unlikable as a character. And a lot of that has to do with, oh my gosh, the Shahar stuff in book 2 had me ready to throw shit. I was ready to throw hands with Sarah J. Maas over the amount of times he kept thinking of Shahar during these important moments with Bryce. Like, literally, sex. And he's thinking of Shahar and how this would never happen. Or Bryce says, I love you, and his thought was, Shahar never would have said that to me. Are you actually kidding me? It just sets you up, it sets Hunt up as just a failure of a character, because that is insane. That is insane for him to be thinking about her. Shahar just shouldn't have been brought up, like, at all in book 2. There's no purpose, or just the points that she was brought up were so stupid. And they just made me so angry. Like, I get why she's brought up when we talk about the rebellion and stuff like that, but for these situations, no. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I hated it. Oh, and I made a TikTok reference. I totally forgot about that while I was doing this yesterday. I don't remember half the stuff that I put on here, by the way. What is it? Sarah. Oh yeah. Sarah makes him think of smashing Bryce at literally the most awkward times. Like, literally the most awkward times. I hated that. And then, TikTok reference. Hunt does not match Bryce's freak. Because that's like are you going to match my freak thing? He doesn't. She is so much of a cooler character than him. And I legitimately don't think he can keep up with who she is as a person. I think she needs somebody I guess he is grounding, but it's almost grounding to the point where she is suffocating some of who she is what it feels like. I feel like I'm reading way too into this, but that's just how I feel about Hunt as a character and their relationship. Oh yeah. Hunt and Shahar was the next thing. I already talked about it. Literally, yeah. Hunt came off as being still hung up on her, and Bryce is the rebound. Multiple times there were situations where Hunt would think about Shahar at these important moments, and you're just like, what are you doing? Stop doing that. Or at least don't tell us that you're doing that. I don't need to hear about that, okay? I just don't. I don't want to hear about it. It makes me not like you. Danica, specific though. I like Danica being in Crescent City 1. I think that was good. It was served the plot line, things like that. I do not think Danica should have been in the book past the first one. I hate that she was the driving force in everything past book 1. I think the ending of part 1 where Danica helps Bryce make the drop should have been it. That should have been their goodbye. That should have been the great moment. And then at the end of book 3, you can keep that in as being like, hey, Danica actually is waiting for her on the other side and waiting for Baxian. But the fact that Danica stayed, that I feel like we rehashed so many things from book 1 in book 2. Like, it was crazy. It was crazy. I thought we were done with Danica, and then it's just like immediately Danica's brought back up. Why bother having that incredibly emotional farewell if you were just going to constantly bring her back up? I don't get that. It totally ruined the ending of Crescent City 1, where it felt like a sigh of relief, like a goodbye, okay, things were put to rest. And then you should have a different motivation for book 2. There's no reason to drag Danica back into this, except for in Ethan's point of view. If you wanted to keep Danica and Ethan's point of view, fine. But Bryce being continually worried about everything Danica does, mistake. Huge mistake. And I also don't like the mate thing. I don't like Baxian being Danica's mate. And it just felt like, I don't know. I just feel like it was so unnecessary to have Baxian be the mate. And that's why Baxian's good. I did not think that was necessary. I think it was for shock value, but it didn't actually add anything to the series, really. Fan service / Azriel. I got some choice words about that. ACOTAR never should have been brought into this series. Never. It was stupid. I feel like it made a really good end of House of Sky and Breath, but it never should have happened. It was wholly uninteresting. There was no purpose to it. It was so stupid, and it also felt like it broke some of the world. It felt like it was just weird, and it took you out of the Crescent City world, literally. It just added nothing to Crescent City. It really didn't. It literally felt like fan service. It felt like Sarah J. Maas knew she was losing people in the series and was like, let me throw in the ACOTAR series because everybody loves the ACOTAR series. And let me promote my next book. It was 1000% that Star Sword is going to be brought up in the next book. You will have to read this series to read the next ACOTAR book, I bet. That's what I think. That's what I think. And that's something later that I talk about. But it was fan service. It was fan service that the fans didn't even want. Like, we thought we wanted it. And then when we had it, we were like, ooh, yuck. That's it. Ooh, brother. That's nasty. It was so bad. And then one of the best things was my friend's theory. I'm going to read it directly because it was very good. It was very good. So Azriel being in the book, we think, Marissa came up with it, was an editing change. So Marissa's theory is Cassian was originally written into the story but replaced with Azriel, so kind of to promote him being the next book. Like, Azriel does seem like he's going to be the next big character in the next ACOTAR book. But when they changed, basically took all of Cassian's name out and replaced it with Azriel at the beginning, like when they're in the caves, they didn't change any of the dialogue. So Azriel did not feel like Azriel, because like I was reading it and I'm like, this is weird. Like, he's not acting like how I would expect. And he like sometimes was acting too much with Nesta that I was like, this is weird. Like, this is very strange. So Marissa's a really good point that we think it was potentially a editing choice where Azriel's going to be the next book, so they didn't want to just put Cassian and Nesta in it, which we already had, A Court to Silver Flames. So we think the editor was like, hey, put Azriel in it, and they just didn't change any dialogue. Because the Cassian at the end of, HOFAS? Cassian at the end of the last book, he acts the same as Azriel did at the beginning of the book. So, and it would make way more sense, like her coming in and being like, oh, it's both of you. That would make so much sense, especially with like Cassian going with Nesta down into the caves. Yeah, so I kind of think that's actually what happened. Like, that's her theory, but I kind of agree with it. And it just shouldn't have happened. What should have actually happened, what would have been way more interesting, was for Bryce to actually go to hell and meet the princes and look at the kingdom and actually have like a really interesting kingdom. And she learns about the history then, because again, the info dump, I will get to that. There was no need for this ridiculous chapter at the end of the book to info dump all this stuff because she couldn't get to hell before. The first half of the book should have been her in hell. It would have been so much better. It would have been so interesting. It would have just been, oh my gosh, so cool. But of course, we could not have that. Instead, we had random ACOTAR characters show up. Didn't love that. Point, there are too many characters. There are too many flippin' characters in this universe. It is insane how many people she tried to shove into these books. Yeah, so there were literally no reason for half of these people to exist. Hypaxia/Jessica could have been one person. Like, because that's the problem. You split the characters up so much that most of them just didn't have, like, started with a cool plot line and then were just, like, thrown aside. So Jessica and Hypaxia could have been one character. Cormac didn't even need to exist. I liked him as a character, but he and his entire storyline with Ophion didn't need to exist. Like, you could have made one of their friends already existing be part of the rebellion. Like, make Flynn or Declan or Therian secretly part of the rebellion. That would have been so much better, and that would have cut out the Cormac and Sophie stuff, and you didn't even need the Thunderbird stuff, really. That seemed really pointless as well, the whole Thunderbird storyline with Emil, and it was just so weird. Why are you adding so many unnecessary characters with these ridiculous storylines that aren't even really completed or necessary for the whole of the story? And Declan and Flynn could have also been a singular character, and Sophie didn't need to exist at all, like I said. This led to the underutilization of the most interesting characters. Fury, Jessica, and like I said, the House of Flame and Shadow could have been like its own thing, which would have been so cool. Oh my gosh, the villains. This is something I talked to at length with Marissa. These villains are like cartoon characters. They have no depth, nothing interesting about them. The Autumn King, for a second, I thought was going to be interesting. And then the showdown with them in the Cave of Princes was actually insanely stupid. It was so, the dialogue was cringe. It was just absolutely terrible. The Autumn King was just a caricature of a villain. Could have been a complicated, interesting villain, but turned into a cartoon character at the end. The final showdown had the most cringe dialogue I have read, like, in all 3 books. It was so bad. And then Morven and the evil twins. What is that? I think I just said, what even was this character? Yeah. Yeah, and then the Asteri. Oh my god. The Asteri were literal space aliens, enough said. Like, literal space aliens. I'm sorry. Who thought that was a good idea? All of the villains in this are just so fake. The Viper Queen is probably the most interesting villain we have. And potentially the Underking, but he even ended up being, like, super lame and dying a super lame way. That was so bad. So bad. And then Sabine. Sabine had, like, 4 lines that she would just repeat. Like, she had nothing else. It was just those 4 lines that she just kept repeating on a loop. That's just who she was. Another character that could have been really interesting. Sabine could have been one of those awful villains from book 1 who ended up having, like, a character change or something interesting where she found out the Asteri used her and her daughter, and she ended up going out in a blaze of fury to avenge her daughter or something. Like, protect Baxian. That would have been interesting. Something other than the cartoon character that she was. Oh god, the side quests. Like I said, I call them side quests. There are too many plot lines. there are too many plot lines. I get now why she did it, so that she could have 1,000 other freaking books come up, because she didn't even finish most of the side quests. She didn't finish Ethan's, she didn't finish Therian's. There is so much stuff left undone. Makes me so mad. She literally just threw those in there so that she could write more books. Girl can't write a trilogy to save her life. She really can't. She really doesn't know how to end a book. It's awful. Side quests are out of control. The entire Ethan side quest of dealing with the pack took up so much space. Oh my gosh. It was pretty much pointless. He really didn't do jack with anybody else, especially in the third book. He just kind of did his own thing, and it just felt so unnecessary to include. It should have been book 3.5. Like, give Ethan and the pack their own half, like, novella, like a 200-page, 300-page book where you just go through what Ethan was doing during what was going on with everybody else. And that way you could have taken 200 pages out of the book and used it to actually wrap up things and finish things you should have done. That pissed me off, the amount of just absolute idiocy that was Ethan's. Oh my gosh. Even though I liked it. I liked Ethan's storyline. I just don't think it should have been in the book. Ophian, I don't think Ophian should have been such a huge part of book 2. Especially to have almost no point or purpose in book 3. I almost feel like House of Sky and Breath just didn't even need to exist. There's so many things that happened in House of Sky and Breath that ended up really not even being important. Sophie was unnecessary. The Thunderbirds were unnecessary. They could have just talked about the Thunderbirds in a past tense, about not even existing at all anymore, and then Hunt is related basically to the Thunderbirds. That could have been the whole thing. That saved you about 500 pages right there. It was just so unnecessary when you could have been expanding on other things that would have been better. I just don't get the point of Ophian. Like, you could have written just so many other things. You could, oh my gosh. It just makes me so mad. Oh man. And then I also agree, Therian's entire convoluted storyline of jumping from River Queen to Viper Queen to Ocean Queen to Renegade. Could have skipped a lot of that. It could have skipped the whole Viper Queen stuff. The Viper Queen just didn't really need to exist. But I get it. You set up the Viper Queen and Therian to have basically their own storyline. That's what's happening. And that's what I care most about. I'm really pissed off about the Sathya Therian storyline not being completed. But that's so mad. Okay, something I've talked about before on this channel, breaking rules. Stop doing it. 2 + 2 = 5 in this book series. So I'm just going to read straight from this. Every fantasy world has its own set of rules. I've said this before, I will say it again. Every fantasy story has its own set of rules. You would not expect an alien spaceship to pop up on the ACOTAR world. That would break the rules of the world and take you out of the story and make you be like, what is this? The Asteri being soul-eating alien goblins is actually wild. It is legitimately wild that that's where Sarah J. Maas decided to go with this book. They should have just been ancient fae that took over. You did not need the world hopping, the universe hopping, the world eating, destroying things. No, just make them ancient fae who keep themselves alive by taking others' power. Right there. Just solved your world-breaking problem right there. And it would have been so much better than her opening a rift at the end of the book into space. I'm trying so hard not to curse. I'm getting so mad. Oh, man. And it took you out of the story. It totally took you out of the story. Calling things parasites also just feels weird. The parasite thing was very strange. Like, it just was. It just didn't feel like it fit in this world that well. The book begins to start, it feels like a sci-fi book. It begins to feel very sci-fi, which doesn't fit in the realms of what this was supposed to be. This is supposed to be really cool urban fantasy, and that is not what the book ends up feeling like. So there was a lot of world breaking, which I think is what really hurt people's enjoyment of the series. Ooh, okay. Lidia's sexist storyline. Do not get me started on Lidia's storyline. I am so beyond pissed off about Lidia's storyline. Lidia having children is such a bitch move. It really is. That is the best way to say this. Sarah J. Maas literally, like, Lydia even says it. Lydia and Rune get in a fight because Rune suddenly feels soft towards her because she has kids and that's why she did the things that she did. And Lydia's like, you shouldn't need that. You shouldn't need that as a reason. But it's like, that's what Sarah J. Maas does to the audience. Sarah J. Maas doesn't believe the audience would be okay with Lydia without giving her children to make her a softer person. I hated that. I hated that. It's basically, it's Sarah J. Maas had to give her children, unlike Baxian. Baxian was just given, yeah, he was Danica's mate and that's why he got nicer. Lydia wasn't allowed to be a bad person. She had to be good because she was trying to protect her children. I really hated that. I know I'm not being super coherent, but I really hated the fact that Lydia had children because I feel like it really ruined her character. I feel like she was such an interesting villain and that ruined her character. Yeah, I'm pretty upset about Lydia's whole storyline. Info dump heaven. This whole series is charged with info dumping. Oh my gosh. Most people don't like info dumping. There's a time for information dumping, and then there is not. Pretty much all 3 books at some point info dumped on the audience to the point where stuff wasn't making sense. Like, oh my gosh, the first 50 pages of Crescent City were almost incomprehensible. My friend told me to just skip them. She was like, just skip them and you'll eventually figure it out. And I was like, and then book 2, honestly, don't remember much of book 2 even though I just read it. Book 3 had that whole chapter, like I said, with Hell, Adis, and Apollyon, and they're explaining, and Thanatos, I think, and they're explaining all of the stuff that we were not told earlier in the books. So bad. It was just, I even said it, CC3 had a massive cluster of information dumped on us to make up for the lack of understanding the plot. That's really what happened, is the plot was making no sense. And so we had to bring in Adis and Apollyon to be like, no, this is why it makes sense. I promise this is why it makes sense. And my brain was screaming the entire scene. So it just was unfortunate. How many more slides do I have? Why did I write so much stuff? Okay, I got 5 slides left. 5 slides left. It was too ambitious. This story was too ambitious. I liked the idea behind it, this new urban fantasy world, but it was too ambitious. She had too many thoughts in her little brain and decided to put all of them in 3 massive books. There was just too much going on. This needed to be simplified, cut down, cut some of the characters. There was just too much happening. It did not work as a reader. It just doesn't. Like she tried to fit basically, it's not high fantasy, but like the level of understanding is, we're just going to say high fantasy, the purpose of it. Most high fantasy books have like 10, 12 books where they slowly go through everything that's going on. This book tried to basically shove information that could have fit in 15 books into 3. And I'm talking about 15 800-page books. That's probably what should have happened if you really wanted to expand on this world and really truly understand it and not just try and confuse the hell out of your audience. It was just, this was a huge key as to why it didn't work. It was too ambitious of a project and it was not plotted out well enough, to be honest. I forgot I made this slide. SJM romance expectations. This is one of my problems. The theory going into this book, especially after reading the first one, is Hunt isn't the final romantic interest because the first romantic interest is never the final one in any SJM series. That's just how it is. So the result of thinking that way is Hunt is never fully loved as a character. He just wasn't. I really thought at any moment, like I thought Adis was actually going to be the romantic interest going into House of Sky and Breath and into the third one. I thought he was going to be what, and I think it would have been more interesting, to be honest, even though that, again, that swerved. It just never felt like Hunt was supposed to be endgame until we were told like, oh yeah, though they're staying together. It just never felt like he was supposed to really be with Bryce, in my opinion. And this is a huge portion of the anti-Hunt feelings throughout the first and second book. Literally, one of the things I hated was literally just the second book. House of Sky and Breath was so pointless. The entire book was filler. So many characters and plotlines were introduced that weren't even important, left a lot of important characters on the sidelines. Hypaxia, Jessica, replaced Hypaxia's storyline with Cormac and Ethan. This is an important thing. Hypaxia's storyline completely changed from book 1 to 2. I think this was actually poor planning on Sarah J. Maas's part. It's like she wrote the first book and then changed her mind about things. So Hypaxia in book 1 really seemed like her and Rune were supposed to be together, and all traces of that were wiped from the planet in the second book. It really felt like Sarah J. Maas changed her mind. Like, she really was planning on putting them together and for them to be a thing. And it would have been cute because, like, they were in forced marriage thing, and I think that would have been really good, actually. And we had backbone and backstory even from book 1, so it could have been such a cute, interesting, slow burn romance through all 3 books, but instead, she changed it to the Hind, which I liked some of it, but it felt too rushed, because I feel like Rune's chapters were so short in book 2 that pretty much everything he focused on was Daybright and the Hind. But they weren't that long. The chapters weren't long. So by the time they, like, get together, it's kind of like, I feel like I needed some stuff in the book 1. So I think Rune's romance would have been better if it was Hypaxia, because we had that backbone built from book 1. So I like the Hind better, but I wish he would have been talking to Daybright since book 1. Yeah, I feel like Hypaxia just became a non-existent character. Like, she was such an interesting and cool character in book 1, and then Cormac and Ethan's storylines took over instead. The entire storyline with Ophian, I just didn't like it. I've already said it multiple times. I don't need to go back over it. Ethan's entire storyline should have been a 3.5 book. Shouldn't have had his powers. Oh yeah, Ethan having his powers to kill Sabine, like unleashing his powers and then killing Sabine, major mistake. Oh my gosh. This book built up Ethan being able to take on Sabine on his own, but then you unleash his powers and he just annihilates her? Where's the fun in that? That was such an anticlimactic death for Sabine. Ethan shouldn't have had his powers yet. He should have had, like, the vials with him and used the vial after he took out Sabine. He should have taken out Sabine while he was still just himself. That would have been so good, but the payoff was so bad by having him be so overpowered and then taking her out then. That was so stupid. That was such a bad decision. And the ending, the fact that there will be a book 4 is absurd. It is ridiculous. Leaving Therian and Ethan's stories on a cliffhanger was incredibly rude. Sigurd and Sathya storylines were, like, some of the more interesting things. Like, Sigurd's storyline, I want to know what happened to her. Like, we suddenly just were like, oh, can't deal with her right now, so let's move on. Even though 90% of Ethan's story in book 3 was dealing with Sigrid. What are you doing? Like, what are you actually doing? And then having Sathya just disappear and Therian is, like, on his way to the meat market to go find her. And then he runs into Ariadne and that's it. That's it. That's it. Oh, I've never been so mad in my life. That level of unresolved is insane. And then the fact that you have to read all of her books now because of the implications of Bryce and Nesta meeting and passing of the sword. Yeah, so I think that is a terrible thing to do to your audience because a lot of people like different things. So ACOTAR and Throne of Glass are totally different things compared to Crescent City. Urban fantasy is so different than what these other book series are. So some people might just not be interested in Crescent City, but the fact that you made it so that the sword was passed at the end of the book, the Star Sword was given to Nesta, and without a doubt will be a part of the next ACOTAR book, or books, whatever, you have to read them now. I am also thinking that there is going to be a Throne of Glass tie-in. There was a single thing that was said that had me questioning if Throne of Glass was going to be thrown in here, because the Underking brings up Wyrd, W-Y-R-D, which is a huge thing in the Throne of Glass series. That is like their magic side of things. So it seems like the Underking potentially is from the Throne of Glass world. And I don't know. I am very nervous now that she's going to touch that series, and I don't think she should. I think Throne of Glass should be completely left alone. It is a finished series. It does not need to be harassed like ACOTAR is being harassed. So at this point, if you want to read ACOTAR, you have to read Crescent City, or at least watch a recap. Like, I think Becca in the books and Kari can read. They have big recaps of the books. So if you don't want to read Crescent City, at least there's that out there. But it does seem like ACOTAR and Crescent City may be interwoven a couple more times, potentially, maybe, which I'm not happy about. So anyway, I know it sounds like I hated this series. There's a lot that I hated about this series. Did I still feel things about these books because Sarah J. Maas is so good about making you feel things? Yes, I am still going to be emotionally connected to these books, especially at the end when you saw Connor and Danica and Lidia, and I was just like, sobbing. So she still made me feel things for these characters. I love these characters besides Hunt. I want to read more from them, but I think it needs to be done in a better way. So I am hopeful for future books that maybe they'll just be better edited or something. But I am quite nervous because it seems like the trend going forward is we're just letting Sarah J. Maas do whatever she wants, which is great in some respects because I think it's great when you can just have that creative liberty as a writer. But at the same time, editors exist for a reason. They exist to temp down some of the creative flow that can be going on, and sometimes not everything is a good idea. And I think these are examples of some things are not a good idea. So anyway, that's what I thought about the series. I'm sorry that I didn't do like everything I thought reading this, but this felt more appropriate to how I was feeling about these books. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely let me know down below what you thought about the series, what you gave each individual book if you read them. If you ended up just watching this for the shits and giggles and you haven't actually read the series, I would love to know that. Thanks for sticking through this very long and frustrating video. Definitely is more of a rant than I've done in a very long time. But anyway, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future content. I'm going to be doing an individual Illumicrate boxing to catch up on July's Illumicrate. I'm probably doing that in a little bit. And yeah, so a lot of unboxings, a lot of vlogs, a lot of things hopefully coming up. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that. And I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.